Good morning, good morning. Wow, look at my lovely tan. Just back from a week in Kos. And I tell you, it was hot. Oh, should I go the wiggly way? Yeah, why not? Let's go the scenic way. Not been to work for a week, so we've got a few things to talk about. I might have to cancel my patients this week because I inherited 2 chairs. Actually, I inherited 3 chairs. And I tried to sell one and then I tried to give it away. But you can't even give away second-hand dental chairs these days. So we just slung it away. I forget what we do with it. I think I took it home and then I left it with any metal. If you leave it at the front of my house, any metal, it'll disappear. People are usually pretty good. They will knock on the door sometimes and say, "Is this scrap?" But yeah. So anyway, it was hot in Kos. It was when we took off to come back, it showed 44. No, let's not go too bad. It was some days it was 42, and when we took off it was 36, I think. So, speaking as an aviator, that's very, very thin air for 36. You know, you're not going to want to derate your engines too much. I've had a weird result. I had like 500 people who saw my previous video, which honestly I can't even remember what it was about. I've tried to have a quick look at it to see why, but for some reason it got picked up by the YouTube algorithms and got 500 views. I mean, we're talking, for a video that has got like 50 views at the best of times, 500 is just mental. For me, that's going fine. Bearing in mind that I'm not half the views. Have I ever asked you to press subscribe or like? No. Well, people who regularly see this channel will know why I say that. Frankly, I think it's a bit creepy following someone. If they don't know who you are, do you know what I mean? It's a bit stalkery, isn't it? But anyway, if you find the content useful, then fine, that's fine. So I've got these 2 chairs left, and their tubes are, the hydraulic tubes are they've lost all their plasticizer, so they're getting really, really stiff and starting to crack. And it applies obviously mainly in those parts of the tube which routinely bend. So we're talking those in the arm, or the the bracket table, and also the trapezium that lifts the chair up, where it connects into the surfaces in the control box underneath the chair. The pipes in there are starting to split. So we had a problem with one chair and it went out of action, US, whatever that means, and we were coping all right with the other chair. And I should have really fixed the first chair. I should have got round to fixing the first chair. But what you do is, if you have a split pipe, basically, you just look for enough slack in the pipe to cut the split bit out and reconnect it, don't you? Even though it shortens the pipe and probably hastens means you should replace the pipe. But anyway, I couldn't do that easily. I did it by mucking about with 3 or 4 small lengths and a load of connectors, but the connectors just started leaking. So I sort of ran into an impasse there. So then what happened? It's now happened with the second chair. So I've had to source some compressor tubing. So it's not expensive. It's about 35 quid for 100 meters. But it's just a question of getting the right size. There are three. It's like the bear's porridge, there's small, medium and large really for dental chairs. Large I know is too big, and so I ordered medium and small, and I think medium is what I'm going to need. And I can send the small back. Obviously, it's on Amazon, so that's great. But for me to have 100 meters of the medium tubing, which I need, constantly, and to be able to carry out these repairs is going to be great for me. There's no point sort of spending £400 on getting someone to come over from Clark's or somewhere to fix a split pipe. And I've got a long history of repairing my own units anyway. I was always taking the units apart and trying to find out why they weren't working. And it's they are really just they're a very early and very simple example of robotics. They're only compressed air, compressed water, electricity. You've got the PCB, which can go wrong. Very few fuses. What goes wrong, as I say, is the hydraulics, the air or the water. Plus, they've got these. There's a few things that where if you get supply air pressure to a valve, it opens another valve, etc., etc. But again, all these components are reasonably accessible. You have to dig around a bit to try and find them, but you can find them. So we'll see. I'll let you know how it goes. I've got no chairs technically working. I'm going to work. I've got no chairs working. So fortunately, my first patient is a denture reline or something. So I'm not going to need chair working so much. And then I've got about a couple of hours booked off to fix the chairs. So that'll be quite a nice, easy day today. And then a few checkups and that. So I'm easing myself back in slowly. Let's not overdo it. Let's not stress things too much. Right. So, just out of interest, I quite like going on holiday because my Bitcoin always goes up while I'm on holiday. I don't know how it knows I'm on holiday, but it usually does. So, but what's going up at the moment is Bitcoin Cash, and which is an offshoot. It's a clone of Bitcoin in the early days. When Bitcoin went one way, Bitcoin Cash went the other. And the original vision that of Bitcoin was to be used as to be a cash. But then certain changes were made to the code, which made it much less useful as a cash and much more likely to end up as a sort of settlement system between governments, or settlement system between banks or large companies that wanted to stay, for example, independent of the dollar, and B, a speculative, I'd call it a monetary good, but other people call it a commodity. So what the so-called number goes up mentality, where people buy it because they see it appreciating in value, and so they see it. They're speculating. These people are gamblers. They're just gamblers. And I would actually go so far as to put it the other way around. I think it's A, gambling, and B, Fedwire, a Fedwire equivalent. And of course, that's no use to someone who wants something that can, just use it to pay their fish and chips. And that's what we did in the early days. We used to go for fish and chips on Saturday morning, and one of us used to pay, and the other one used to give them the Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin Cash had a following that really cared quite passionately about it being useful as cash. And so what they did was they kept the transaction fees next to nothing, and the speed pretty much instant. And so Bitcoin Cash, you could say, is Bitcoin. In fact, it is Bitcoin. It was a clone of Bitcoin initially, and it's been optimized for use as cash. And until recently, you could get one Bitcoin Cash for about $300. The actual Bitcoin itself used to be $300, is now $110,000, I think, $117,000, something like that. So you'd be hard pressed to buy a Bitcoin now, but you can, because most people can still buy a Bitcoin Cash. That takes me back to the early days of Bitcoin, where I had a friend of mine, his brother came over from Bulgaria, and his brother we were talking about Bitcoin, and his brother said, is it worth buying them? Is it worth buying them? And I said, you've got this global money that's independent, immutable, perfectly transportable across national lines, etc. And at the time it was about $230 a Bitcoin. I said, and you can get you can pick them up at the moment for $230 a Bitcoin. I said, which bit of that deal do you not think is absolutely brilliant? But I've had a lot of conversations like that. I know it's not, I'm now very used to having. In fact, now I don't have those conversations like that at all. Just don't bother. I don't. I'm fed up with staring into people's blank faces because they don't have. My favourite saying, don't you, about Bitcoin combines everything that people don't know about computers with everything that people don't know about money. And so I just don't bother explaining it much anymore. And needless to say, he just stared at me blankly and then went on eating his milkshake. So I was in the early days, Bitcoin was going up. It was somewhere between 500, or somewhere between 200 and £1,000 or something. And I set a target of buying 10 Bitcoin for less than £10,000. If I thought I could get 10 Bitcoins, and I couldn't afford to buy 10 Bitcoins outright, I was buying them gradually, but I was rather hoping and praying that the price wouldn't go up. So, as it was, I managed to buy 10 Bitcoins for less than £10,000, which was good. And Bitcoin Cash reminds me a bit of that now, You can buy a Bitcoin Cash for about 500 quid, which gives everybody the chance to buy 10 Bitcoin Cashes for less than $10,000, £10,000, whatever. And you might say, well, yeah, but, why should I do that? And there's only one answer to that, which I'll give you, is that the market for cash is much larger than the market for Fedwire Bitcoin. The total market for bank transfers into intergovernmental transfers is dwarfed by the market for just peer-to-peer cash payments. So, and the way that value is calculated, value is calculated on whether something's useful and scarce. And the thing about Bitcoin is it's provably scarce and demonstrably scarce, in that there are only going to be 21 million ever. So the argument about value then hinges entirely on its utility, its usefulness. Given that scarcity is a constant, then it's like E equals mc squared. C squared is a constant, so E always equals m, proportional to m. So, how much utility is there in these coins? That's what it all boils down to. And to be honest with you, I don't have that much use for a coin that is accepted but not widely accepted and has, um, significant transaction costs and has a lot of heat attached to it in terms of, if you do anything of any substance with it, anything more than say £10,000 worth of a transfer, then you're going to get reported to the government under money laundering. So the future, as far as I'm concerned, is in Bitcoin Cash. But I've had to wait like 10 years for people to come round to that. Now, the reason why I'm talking about it now is because the value of Bitcoin Cash, having been over $1,000 when it split off from Bitcoin and when there was maximum optimism about it being, being used as a cash and the cash supplanting the Fedwire coin, and then it all settled down, and people then said, well, Bitcoin's got first mover advantage, and lots of people could tell you what Bitcoin was, but never heard of Bitcoin Cash. So it settled down and it bumbled along at $150, $200 for a long time. And as recently as about 6 weeks ago, it was about $200 and something. And then all of a sudden it shot up to 590. So, I mean, if you've got 100 Bitcoin Cash, say, you're not really going to notice them going up. If you've only even got, say, 2 or 3 Bitcoins, 2 or 3 Bitcoins will make you more money over the same period than 100 Bitcoin Cashes, because they're actually just going up, obviously, from a smaller base. So a couple of Bitcoins going up like 2% will make you $6,000-7,000, whereas Bitcoin Cash going up 5% will make you 5% of $300, which is $15 times however many coins you've got. So you'd have to have a lot of Bitcoin Cash to be worried about your Bitcoin Cash stash. But the thing is, as I say, you take it from me, I've seen this before. I'm going around saying to people, actually, you've got your eye on the wrong ball. You're all looking at Bitcoin. And you shouldn't be looking at Bitcoin. You should be looking at Bitcoin Cash, which is what Bitcoin was originally designed to be. Peer-to-peer, person-to-person. Carry it on your phone cash. And which works very well as that. And is therefore, and there are the same number of coins. So if you can see Bitcoin being $100,000, you should be able to see Bitcoin Cash being $100,000, at least more, because it's a bigger market. More people will want it and use it. So, but people can't see that. They can't see that now any more than the people I was explaining Bitcoin to 10 years ago could see Bitcoin going from £1,000 up to £100,000. And what are you going to do? You can't. I mean, I can see it. That doesn't mean I'm going to buy any more Bitcoin Cash. I've got some Bitcoin Cash. So, in a way, I've got my bases are covered. But it's interesting to see it go up from $300 to $590 in the space of about 5 weeks. It does seem to me that someone, somewhere, has had a light bulb moment. And I fully expect And the thing is, these things gain momentum. If anything, any coin doubles in a matter of 2 months, then it attracts a lot of attention. There'll be a lot of other people saying, well, what's this going on with Bitcoin Cash? There is another coin, funnily enough, that was also split off from Bitcoin and optimized as a cash coin, and that's called Dash, which is short for digital cash. And while I'm a big fan of the promise of the early Dash coin, it paid dividends. If you accumulated enough Dash and staked them, in other words, lent them out, you could get dividends. And so what happened was the owners, especially the original owners who amassed quite a lot at a low rate, and that's what they did. They just staked their coins, didn't do anything with them, weren't at all interested in the utility of it. The coders improved the utility of it, but it never translated to any sort of utility in the real world. It had some promises at one time that they were going to make it programmable so that other programmers could utilize it, for value transfer, etc. But that upgraded functionality took forever. It took years and years to come about. And in the meantime, it's never got anywhere because, as I say, it's a perfectly usable coin and a good coin, but it's got third mover advantage. Probably second mover advantage. Say it's the second best cash coin. Bitcoin Cash being the first best cash coin. And I think in the realm of digital cash, Bitcoin Cash is going to get the first mover advantage as a cash. So, now I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not charging you anything for this. So if you run out and buy a pile of Bitcoin Cash on an exchange like Kraken or Coinbase, that's on you, okay? You do your own due diligence on this. It's for entertainment purposes only. But that's just my thoughts, in good faith, on the situation, because I like echoes. I recognise echoes in history, and this, being able to buy Bitcoin Cash at these sort of prices, just reminded me of when you could buy Bitcoin at these sort of prices. And we all know where Bitcoin is now. Hoping things will be a bit quieter because of the everyone's on holiday. So let's back in here because I've got to unload my toolkit and everything. That'll do. Right. Excuse me. Nice to talk to you. See you soon. Bye.